up? It's Dwan Dandridge, CEO of Black Leaders Detroit, and we are back with another episode of Speak for Yourself. Of course, we have Ken Elkins from Saginaw Awesome, our amazing COO here representing. Ken, you want to say what up, though?
Well, I don't know why you had to say from Saginaw Awesome, but okay.
Represent, bro.
What up, though? Is that how y'all say it in Detroit?
Of course.
That's how you say it.
Of course not. But it's okay. You get a pass. And we also have a good friend of mine, David Contorer, here with us from Hebrew Free Loan. How would you introduce yourself? And the reason we do that is because I hear people get introduced. I've gotten to introduce people to, in spaces, and I'm like, that's not how I would describe myself to an audience. So go ahead and fire away.
I will fire away. I'm David Contorer, and I'm the Executive Director of Hebrew Free Loan. Dwan and I met about 2.5, 3 years ago now, three plus years ago, and we both love biking and 0% lending, which we'll talk about during the podcast. But I'm a 53-year-old guy, lived in suburban Detroit now for about 23 years, and I love what Black Leaders Detroit does. We're good friends, and it's only getting to be a deeper and more enriched friendship, and getting to know Ken. Love my interactions with him, and I'm excited to be on the Ride for Equity with you guys heading up to Mackinac. I believe in BLD and what you all are doing, and I know we'll get into that. But as far as introducing myself, I'm married to a wonderful woman, Beth. We have 2 lovely daughters, Danielle and Maya, and we'll leave it at that for now. But I'm really excited to be here with you, Dwan and Ken. And Martez off camera. Making it all happen. Give Martez his love too.
Martez makes the magic happen. Yeah.
Right.
So definitely glad to have you here. Long overdue. There's a lot of places we can go with the conversation. I guess where I'd like to start is Hebrew Free Loan. Can you describe, how do you describe Hebrew Free Loan?
Sure. So in 1895, on this, I think, same road behind us that we're going to talk about here, black bottom picture that Dwan is teaching me more about. In 1895, Hebrew Free Loan began in Detroit. It was 0% loans, which have actually been in the Jewish community for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. It's something that's mentioned in the Torah, in Exodus. It actually says when a Jewish person is in need, you shall provide a loan without charging interest. And it's also mentioned in the Quran. So I've worked with my friends a little bit in Dearborn, Maha Frege, who's the awesome CEO of Access, to try and work on 0% lending, providing a loan, dollars for someone that helps them get out of a situation or to afford something that's a financial challenge. And then they pay a little bit at a time, a little bit per month, until that loan is repaid without any fees, without any interest, without any collateral, in a dignified and respectful way. And so Hebrew Free Loan in Michigan has been operating. It's based in suburban Detroit, and it started off on Hastings, and now we're in Bloomfield Hills. But it services Jewish people across the state of Michigan in providing 0% loans to improve lives. So it's usually in 3 buckets: personal, educational, and small business loans. That's the one where we share a great commonality with Black Leaders Detroit, the 0% small business loans. So that's how I would describe it.
Oh, that's dope.
That's dope, right?
So personal and education. So is that like scholarships, not necessarily scholarships, but loans to go back to college for? Exactly. Is that for any age of folk who want to go to school?
It's for any age person who's Jewish, who's a Michigan resident, and they have to be going to school in the state of Michigan. Okay. That's called our William Davidson Jewish College Loan Program. The dollars primarily came from the William Davidson Foundation. We have a bunch of other funders as well. And it's mostly the teens who are graduating from high school who then are going to be full-time, either undergrad or then in their 20s grad students at Michigan-based colleges and universities. But there are folks older, non-teens, who come back to get their master's degree or their whatever, and it makes a huge difference. I don't know your family, Ken, but I know you've got one at Michigan State, and I've got 2 at U of M, and wherever school you go, it is so much money, tuition and the room and board and the books and all the fees.
No doubt.
Even if you've saved up for it, our ability to use a 0% loan to pay for school, and then they have, after they graduate, 10 years to pay back the total amount. Each year they can get an interest-free loan to pay for that education.
I mean, that's huge, right? I think about our friends that have graduated and took out loans. I mean, we don't even have to say how many years ago, but
Right.
decades, right?
Decades.
Yeah.
That are still like paying on some of those,
Yeah.
those loans, right? If not, just being free, debt free on them. But that's huge. That's a huge
Yeah, I
thing.
think I just paid my loan off. Then I graduated school like 25 years ago. I think I just paid mine
It's
off.
enormous.
So,
Student debt in this country is enormous. So if you tack on 7, 8, 9, 10% to that,
Yeah.
which is what most of the federal loans and other programs are, it makes it an even bigger debt. So if we can do 0% loans to invest in education, that's our largest loan program, between 130 and 200 students per year
Okay.
go
Well,
through that program. So we're really, COVID set us back. It was weird. A lot of kids, a lot of young people did not go to campuses during 20 and 21 and starting to come back in 22. We think this year is going to be back kind of on pre-COVID numbers.
okay.
Yeah.
So thinking about the synergy, I think you touched on it, right? We met about 3 years ago. It was Chris Lambert that made the introduction, right?
Yeah.
I still remember the day you were
Me too.
coming up out of the office. I was getting headed into the office, and Chris knew, what we were up to, right?
Yeah.
So it's like thinking back to those all those meetings when we were birthing, Black Leads Detroit, Ken, and we talked about doing grants and a no interest loan, right? And with me not having any finance background at all, right?
Right.
And like nobody on our original board members,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Had that type of background, but we had the need was there, and the desire to make it happen, and the confidence that
Yeah, we could do it.
that we could do it,
And a
right?
visionary who wanted to get it done. So.
So boom, set out on a mission to do it. Met with you, and right away, like you were ready to share information.
Absolutely.
And I see that as a consistent theme in the way that you operate and move in different spaces. So huge appreciation. I think about some of the reservations that are in that space when you talk about like the Black and Jewish community at times. And I think that one of the things I appreciate about you is that you don't spend any time worrying about that or trying to prove that any of that's not happening or is happening. Right. What you do is operate in a way that you identify folks that you believe in, have something in common, and you're like, if I have something to share, I'm willing to share it. So it was great to be able to get a blueprint I was 124 years old at the time, right? And take it and look at it and be able to process it and kind of make some tweaks, right? I think about where if we would have had to create that wheel or invent that wheel ourselves without that, we still would have got it done.
Yeah.
Right?
It would have been a lot more difficult without having that baseline or something to at least look at and say, okay, this has been done before. It's proven that it's been done before.
Yes.
So that it's obviously something that we can do. We just have to figure out how to tweak it for our particular demographic, right? And how to make that work. But definitely having that baseline took a lot of stress off our shoulders. So that's definitely appreciative. And I think I don't know if you're going to ask a question. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Because into that, the greatest part, not just in that part, David, but then you being a great friend to Dwan, but you just been a great friend to BLD.
Oh, for sure.
Period. Right. So, you come to the events. You support the organization as a member. Let's talk about that.
Sure.
You're a member of BLD.
Right.
Why is that important to you to support the organization?
I think your mission is awesome. First of all, Dwan nailed it. I love the way you mentioned the way we met. I still have the picture. Dwan knows also every time I meet, I do a selfie document.
Oh, yeah, I know that too. You took the selfie when we was at. You love to take selfies.
It's not just that I'm a megalomaniac.
I think you tried to take a selfie. We was in the bathroom. Ken, let's take a selfie. David, this ain't the place for a selfie.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands
I hope
first,
the audience
David.
knows he's joking. It was not in the bathroom. But I do like to document when I connect with people, and I felt immediate connection when I met with Dwan through Chris Lambert, who's another phenomenal leader in our community, and obviously the synergy of 0% lending, and we had this blueprint, you're right, in the Jewish community, and I said, listen, if we've got anything in our knowledge of how to do this that I can help with, we started meeting at the congregation.
Yep.
I have pictures of that too. Of all those meetings, I brought in some of my best assets, which are just smart, good people again, you know my philosophy, Dwan. You did a nice job summarizing it. I don't care what color someone is, what religion someone is, what gender someone is, what zip code. If you're a good person doing good things to help your neighborhood, your community, I'm going to be there, and I will roll up my sleeves, and I'll support, and I'll give money, and I'll give my blood, sweat, and tears. That's just how I roll. And I immediately liked Dwan, like I immediately liked Chris. And we started meeting and talking about our systems of how we do our magic, which is just 0% lending, and some of the contracts and the promissory, some of the legal documents, some of the structures of how our board works. And you're right, Ken mentioned that, it's a little different. BLD does it a little differently, the way you process your applications and the way you interview and the way you have a loan officer make the decisions. And we're going to get more into that as BLD and Hebrew Free Loan get to meet each other and really learn from each other. And we're blessed in that we have a 98.5% repayment rate over our 127 years.
Wow.
That's a real number because we work with the borrower who gets the loan. And in our situation, it's co-signers. Each loan has to have at least two people on it that co-sign. So if something happens to that borrower in the repayment, the co-signers own part of the repayment.
Okay.
And they split the deficit.
Yeah, and Ken, you'll remember that was one of the first things we realized that wasn't going to work.
Right. Yeah. It was like,
that wouldn't work well. We wouldn't. Most of our borrowers wouldn't be able to come to the table with two co-signers. So as we leave that as an option to bring one co-signer, we just figured that would be a barrier that too many wouldn't be able to overcome. Right. So I do want to talk a little bit about the need, right?
Please.
So like for us, it's well documented, tons of research that talks about Black people, not just Black entrepreneurs, but like people in different ways that redlining has happened, not having access, the same type of access to capital as white people. Right. And we, though we believe in working with everybody and hope that things will get better, and that, some of those things that have kept us on the outside looking in for far too long will be corrected. And truth be told, I feel like there are people in some of those leadership seats that have a desire. But one of the things I'll point to often is that because you have the desire, that doesn't mean you have the ability. Yeah. Right? Like most of them were raised up in these same institutions, right, and trained a certain way. So we just didn't think it would be wise to sit and wait on the self-correct or the auto-correct or the intentional correct to take place. We figured we'd start something that would be led by Black Detroiters, right, and set aside for Black Detroiters. Love it. Can you talk a little bit about the history? Sure. Why was there a need for Hebrew Free Loan to begin with?
Very good question. First of all, I love what you said, and we'll come back to obviously focus on BLD and the systemic racism and the issues that you mentioned on access to capital. But in the Jewish community, again, we're talking now historically thousands of years through hundreds of years ago when we lived as sort of citizenless people in Europe or in other countries. We were absolutely not allowed to get money from banks, and we had to sort of circle our wagons and have our own communal institutions. I always mention to people who aren't real familiar with the history, if you ever saw Fiddler on the Roof, that was called a shtetl. A shtetl was like a little Jewish community that was way outside of the city, and the locals who didn't like Jewish people would come from time to time and burn things and pillage and beat people up and do awful things. Those were the same conditions where Jews could not bank and had to have their own resources in order to start businesses and share resources to do things like starting up a business or like having money to fix your house or whatnot. That same institutional otherness of I don't have access to things was in the immigrants who would arrive in the United States, like in the 1890s in Detroit. And on this street, on Hastings in 1895, some Jewish German immigrants who were here who had some assets put a couple of dollars, I think it was $50 in the time in 1895. That became the first nucleus of our loan capital pool. Okay. And they were like $5 loans or $10 loans that allowed people, I still have the documents from the 1890s where they would take a loan for a horse and buggy or for coal to heat themselves during the winter when it was cold in Detroit. And they couldn't get access from a bank, and there was it was obviously, I am not likening it to the racism that Black people have experienced in this country at all. It was a separate issue. There was some anti-Semitism and whatnot. There were barriers about access to capital, but really it became something different, which it is today, which is just people in our community who could go into a bank, and if they had a decent source of income and a decent credit score, could get a loan, But the people we see at Hebrew Free Loan are those that get turned down by banks, not because of racism. I mean, I can pass. I understand that, guys. I'm Caucasian. I can, I understand the systemic racism that if someone that looked like me and someone that looked like you guys typically wrote the same business plan and went to a bank, there's a higher chance that I'm going to get a loan and the person of color is not, the black person wouldn't. I understand that those things exist today, and I'm not comparing the two. I'm just saying that in our community, a lot of the loan applications we see for personal, educational, and small business loans come from people who have cash flow challenges. So it's morphed out of, we started it because we couldn't get access to capital back in the immigrant times, now to just dealing with people who have economic challenges.
Nice.
And they can't get what they need. Maybe they can get part of what they need to start up their business, and they need some delta amount to launch their food truck or their yoga studio. We're that kind of delta that helps them loan it on the small business side.
Nice. And did I hear you correctly? You said it started it did start in Detroit?
Well, so Hebrew Free Loan Detroit started in Detroit. Then most major cities have a Hebrew
Free Loans, right?
Totally separate. Yeah.
So is every organization connected?
So we're friends. We talk to each other. We compare notes.
Okay.
Each one is a completely separate, I'm going to use a Doug Stewart term here, for impact organization.
Okay.
Doug, if you're out there, you're going to be glad I didn't use the NP word. A 501c3 public charity, a charitable organization that has impact.
Right.
So each major Jewish community in North America had its own free loan, and most of them were started by immigrants.
Okay.
For that same mentality that, we can't get access to capital. There's anti-Semitism. There's people that aren't going to loan to us, and our people have financial needs. They need to start out. They need to bring people over from the old country before bad things happen. There were bad things happening to Jewish people all over Europe mostly. And when they would bring them here, they would use the loan to start them up. And this went even through the 1990s when a large influx of Jews came from the former Soviet Union to places like Detroit, Chicago, New York, Montreal, Toronto. All of those cities had a free loan, and the immigrant folks would come and they could qualify to get a used car. It just gives you a leg up and the ability to get those resources to help you learn English, get a car, get a place to live until you could pay back the loan and be self-sufficient. That's the whole notion of an interest-free loan, whether you're Black Leaders Detroit or Hebrew Free Loan or whomever you are. You're helping someone overcome that challenge to be self-sufficient. And I love it. So that's why I'm all over the BLD mission.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's one of the things that excites me is when the thinking about Hebrew Free Loan, making loans today with money that they got a century ago. Yeah. Right? As I think about like us doing the work, I'm thinking about the money, the loans that we're putting out now, the money that we're raising now, being here and being recycled, and somebody sitting in your seat, Ken, sitting in my seat 100 years after we're long forgotten, right? But still using the money to do this type of work. Yeah. That really, really gets me geeked and excited.
That does.
That will happen, and I want to commend you all on the amazing work you've done in 3 years. I've said to Dwan, I'll say it on camera, it's incredible what you've accomplished, not only in putting together your loan infrastructure and putting out $750,000 in loans last year. Is that right? 0% loans again?
We did 500. We're going to do 750 at least this year.
I love it. That's in addition to all the grants you do for the charitable organizations, the 4 impact organizations, Doug Stewart, that are Black-led, and some of which I know. And I just love everything about your mission, that dual purpose, the 0% loans helping Black entrepreneurs, and the support for Black-led leaders who are running charitable organizations that are having an impact. And when Dwan walks in or Ken walks in with that huge check, I love your Facebook videos. It just, their whole face lights up, and you're bringing them hope, and you're bringing them a shot in the arm, a steroid shot that says, we see that you're doing great work, and here's some dollar signs to help you. That's exciting, and they get excited about Black Leaders Detroit, and they get excited to get back the next day to continue to do that great work. So, again, I'm on your side, and anything I can do behind the scenes to help you all, I will continue doing it.
Yeah, and it's funny because that's always your approach. You always I don't want to be in front of the camera. I'm behind the scenes. Let me do whatever I can do to help, and appreciate that, right? Because Ken, you know what it's like, right? We work with folk, and we get funding from organizations, and what often, I'm just going to say, this is what it feels like to me. Oftentimes, especially with Black organizations, Black-led organizations, I feel like some of the places where big chunks of the money come from, or large donations come from, there's a desire to lend credibility to some of these organizations. And I want to see us being able to have a caring, loving conversation between funders and the organizations that are doing the work, that are having the impact, right? As if the need is mutual, right?
Yeah.
And not so one-sided, because that's what it feels like. The exchange, the interaction, and the way that the conversations happen seem to be like as if the need is one-sided. And one of the things that Ken will often say is that when we're meeting with potential funders, if they don't see us as a partner, then it's probably not going to work out. And watching the way that you move and the way you're quick to play the background, I have a running tally in my mind on the dollars that you've introduced us to, the connections that you've introduced us to. Like one of our biggest funders came from an introduction that you made, and they were excited, and you didn't hesitate to make the connection. So when you talk about the term ally, that's become really, really popular. That's what that means by definition, right? It means you're coming along to assist, not run the show, not to be out front, not to do something for the sake of being praised and worshipped. You know what I mean?
I love it. I said early on to Dwan, I really appreciate that. I said, I am here to help. I am here to stay behind. I'm in front of the camera today because it was time to, I think, share this bond that we have, not just our personal friendship, but Hebrew Free Loan and Black Leaders Detroit. You're going to be hearing our names a lot more because I'm excited about us partnering, not just biking together, but partnering. And I said, this is never going to be about me. It's not about HFL. It's I am behind you, and if there's something I can do, I will do it. And I don't want the camera on us. And this is about you all, and keeping the light on you, and you're the ones making the impact.
That's even an approach you took on the bike ride. I noticed the very first bike ride, David was hanging to the back man, I got this dude. I could beat him. No, I can't.
Don't believe the hype.
We're doing the hype.
His back was sore last year. That's the reason he didn't ride.
He didn't ride last year, right. In a year before, but he just took the back, you said.
So you've been riding about 15 years now, right?
About 15 years.
Yeah. So you do the Make-A-Wish Foundation ride probably for the last how many years?
Since 2008.
So 2008. That's a 300-mile ride.
300 miles in 3 days. 300 miles.
3 days, 300 miles.
3 days, 300 miles.
So we do a 377 over the course of 7 days.
Right.
And I mean, so we went out and did some hill riding last year.
I love it.
Who you and David did?
Me and David.
Okay.
Did, just the two of us, right? So there's some hills out at Kensington.
That's right.
And one is 8%. You know what I mean? And so I'm riding, I'm training, and look, I'm trying to go up this hill. I'm bumping the Rocky soundtrack. Whatever. No, that one. That's the one. The one you were singing, humming. And I'm trying to geek myself up, pushing myself, and I'm going about 4 or 5 miles per hour up the hill. So he's moving so fast that he's got enough time to get up the hill, get his phone out, and record me, narrate, Dwan's coming up. You can't see him. You know what I'm saying?
You can't see him, but he's down there.
So I say that to just give you an idea of what to expect. I remember watching them because before training for the Ride for Equity, I probably told you, I get on my bike, I do 20 miles. That's my workout. I'm done. I used to think, why the hell would anybody ride more than that?
I still think that. And I've been on the ride.
But I remember when I started watching him on social media, he'd go out and just, it's a good day for a 50-mile ride. And there it is with his selfie at the University. What was it?
Well, he's being modest because I remember being up at the top of the hill, and I told him at the start, I said, I know that you all are, as you get closer to Mackinac, you're going to hit some hills.
There's some hills up there.
We don't really have hills like that down here, but I got to have you come meet me at Kensington. You got to do these rides to get the rolling hills, get your legs and basically your rear end used to being in those very high incline, relentless kinds of rides. He was great. He was great and got to the top, and you We do think Ken might be on steroids. I think
Ken might be on steroids.
Either that or Ken has
it hasn't
really
been confirmed.
but there's
like,
no
haters.
It has not been confirmed.
He's done exceptionally well in the last year.
Yes, I did.
Progress.
Look, no, it's some type of performance enhancement.
Sure. He did train in Moscow, I think.
That's what
no doubt.
That's what it was.
Aside
No doubt.
from all the jokes,
Yes.
Ken and Dwan are good, great cyclists and enjoying it. And this, I know we're joking around it. I mean, I'm so excited for this ride.
Yeah.
I'm going to be with you all for.
Because you're going all the way with us, right? This time,
all the way. I'm bringing two friends, and I'm calling them out on film. Richard Kaiden and Beth Brandvain, two very good friends of mine, also from the Jewish community, also seasoned riders, way better than me. I mean, if they're injured, I might have a chance at catching up and passing them. But they're great, fun people. We're going to have a great time, and we're going to raise a lot of dollars and awareness for Black Leaders Detroit.
Yeah, that's it.
And I love it. And so excited to be with you guys and ready to ride. May 21.
May 21, get started.
Mark your
Yep.
calendars.
Yep. Right.
Meet us at Marygrove, May 21. Whatever your ability. Come and bike with us to Ferndale. Right?
That's
I'm doing
it.
your plug-in.
I know, right?
Plug away. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun this year, right? So we have some exciting young riders that are talking about coming out to join us. We're hoping that they go ahead and sign up, but we also have a Black-owned bicycle bar. It's going to kind of like lead the way, have DJ
on it, yeah.
So that should be a lot of fun for the ceremonial send-off. And that's for those of you that don't want to ride the short 67-mile ride to Flint day one. But you can come out and do a really short ride with us, slow pace, police escorts, and just give us a good farewell as we head up to Mackinac. So
I'm really excited also for the safety precautions you all have in place. I know Ken and Dwan and Martez with the filming and with the safety cars on the front and the back with the flashing light. I have seen, sadly, some incidents that I'm not going to go into where being on the road, whatever even if you're well-intended and on a charitable ride, can be deadly, can be very frightening. So having that safety in place and using as many trails as we can is a great call. Definitely. I know that's a motivator for Doug Stewart and Richard Kaiden and Beth and myself. So we're just excited to be there. And then I'm really excited to be part of the conversations, the Speak for Yourself conversations that you have. I remember when Dwan mentioned that you all kind of brought that in as a part of the experience on your way up to Mackinac. And it's just ingenious because it's not something people often talk about. So, again, I will sit behind and jump in if and when appropriate. But
I'm sure you'll have something to add to the
but
conversation.
I mean, I love it that there's a group of a mix of Black and Jewish and whomever else riders coming from Metro Detroit and going through parts of Michigan where they might not be used to seeing Black and Jewish people.
Yeah.
And having a conversation, whatever that might be. As you lead it, I'll be excited to hear and see and people getting to meet each other. And I know you say this so eloquently, Dwan. People just getting to meet each other and you realize that friendships can form when you just put aside all the baloney you see on the news or reading the paper and the negative stuff that people try to sometimes focus on is the stereotype. And I'll say it, there's good and bad people in every community, in every, minority group. And there's certainly nice people and people that I would not want to hang out with from my community. I cringe every time I see a news story where somebody who has a Jewish last name commits some kind of white-collar crime. I think, lovely, that's another person that will promote the negative stereotype. Just like I'm sure you guys probably feel that when you see somebody who, whatever. I don't want to focus on negative stuff. That's just my life is too just not in that world. I don't want to be about negative energy. So hanging out with you guys and people from BLD, and I mentioned some other folks from, who I hang out with, from the Jewish community, from the Black community, from whichever community, who are about positive bridge building. Who have a sense of humor, who can make jokes about themselves, who can put out their hand and say, I'm here to help, and that's who I'm going to hang out with. And there's a lot of people like that, they don't get the narrative so often.
And they don't get the shine, right? The cameras don't come around for that. You know what I mean? So like we have to create it, right? So we had to create Speak for Yourself, and I'm just convinced. I mean, if people from my community, right, our community can be misunderstood, I'm just convinced that people from other communities can be misunderstood as well.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And you see it quite a bit. I mean,
when you start to have your own relationships, right? Like you can't, like convince me otherwise, right? The ride for equity. And we know that, like, we were hanging out with people for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Truth be told, like, they hang out with me long enough, and if I say the things that are honestly on my mind, I'm going to say something that might be hurtful, offensive, or, like, triggering to people.
Yeah.
And the same thing might happen. But if you're able to give me the benefit of the doubt and say, wait a minute, like, with education and understanding why that's painful, that's not what I'm intending to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we experienced on the ride. But I mean, through being, I guess, courageous enough to have a relationship with people like you, some of my other friends, I get to experience that on a regular basis. And my desire is for more people to do it. You know what I mean? And it's risky. You know what I mean? It's risky, it's challenging, and it's scary. You know what I mean? Because you don't know. One of the things I used to tell Chris is that working like with white people that do for impact work in Detroit, one of the questions that we have when we're working so closely is, like, how long are you going to be here when it gets really, really hot, right? Like, when it gets really, really, like, challenging, are you going to stick around? Because bouncing or taking off or going somewhere else is an option for you, right? Like, it's not for me. Like, my reputation, you know what I mean, is at risk all the time, and people are watching, and, you know, as fast as people want to boast about you, brag about you, or bring you up, you know, the media gets paid the same, if not more, for bringing you down.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And then, you know, like, our community is very vulnerable, extremely vulnerable. With all the development that's happening in Detroit, there are decisions being made where, you know, at best, in a lot of cases, you know, the community members are on councils that offer advice and not necessarily there to make decisions. You know what I mean? So it's risky, it's scary, but for me, I'm convinced that it's worth it, right? I have enough relationships, experiences of my own to combat the other narratives that are just as real.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just don't think they represent as big a part of any of the communities as we've been trained and conditioned to think.
I'm so glad you feel that way, and I'm so glad that Chris introduced us, because, you know, even if you're well-intended, and I'm someone who I tried to look for projects and people and little pockets of how to be involved in Detroit with things that I care about: philanthropy, neighborhood revitalization, economic development, education, mentorship. Connected with Otis Bellinger. Got to give a shout out to my friend from Building Better Men.
Yes, what amazing work.
Amazing work. Selfless, amazing work with having influence on young black men in the city, sharing so much of his guidance as a big brother, friend, leader, mentor to help them get through their young adult years and be good leaders and go to school, etc. And I don't want to be a wonk at a big organization or on a board. I like playing small ball and connecting with people who are seeing things. And so if I hadn't met you through Chris, I'd still be kind of looking for a way to be involved. And I know people. That's why I was able to kind of bring in Richard Kiden and Beth Brandvain, David Broner. You've met people like myself who want to be involved, want to connect. And it's hard sometimes to find something, like you said, to go out of your comfort zone and find someone from a different group, from a different racial background or a different religious background or a different zip code, and just kind of jump in there and say, hi, I want to help. I don't want to be a pain. I know it's weird for me to be here. You know, it looks weird that I just showed up here, but I genuinely want to help. I can bring some stuff. So connecting with you, finding a cool way of doing that, and being involved in a way that I can help Black Leaders Detroit. And now one of the things I wanted to bring up and get Dwan's thoughts on, and Ken jump in too, is we're starting a model where Dwan and I basically said, I've got nothing more to show you. You know, like 3 years, you're already killing it with your 0% loans, and you have all this other knowledge that I need to learn about in your social media and your promotion and your outreach and your events and the great work you're doing with your grants to nonprofit leaders. Would you work with me as a partner to help someone that we identify like Church of the Messiah, Pastor Barry Randolph and Pastor Wally? How do we help them build capacity? The knowledge you have and the ability to do philanthropy that you got quick on and talented at very quickly in your 3 years is amazing, and the knowledge you have of what it's like to run an organization in the Black community. I can bring some pieces of that, so it's like the Dwan and David show kind of now becomes a partnership where we can help another organization. That's a cool model that I'm excited about. We're already starting to make a difference a little bit.
There are so many amazing Black-led organizations doing like high impact work. You mentioned Otis, Church of Messiah. That's the reason we started Black Leads Detroit, because it's our belief that the answer and the solution to the problems that exist in the Black community are in the Pastor Berries, in Otis, you know what I mean, in Anthony White, Terrell Hogan, Kyrie Turner, Kyrie Frazier, you know what I mean, you name it. We feel like they have the answers. The rub is they started their organizations to do just what they're doing extremely well, and that solved the problem. They didn't start their organizations to raise money, right?
Yeah.
But as my friend Tamashian says it best, we don't do it for the money, but it takes money to do it. So,
well said.
So sometimes the infrastructure for the business is secondary.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one of the things that, I have a passion for that, Ken. And me and David are looking to figure out how to bring the things that I've learned, the things that he's learned, and share them with somebody and help them give some structure to be able to continue to open them up to opportunities for more resources. So,
absolutely. Well said. And if this model works, the ability for us to connect some of those people, I mean, if I can help on this, let's call it the supply side, there's so many foundations, family foundations, institutional foundations. I mean, you all have been amazing in your 3 years connecting with, the corporate as well, the bank and the other corporate foundations that make grants to BLD. But there's so much philanthropy out there, dollars that have to be and should be moved to help out Metro Detroit in economic development, education, mentorship, neighborhood revitalization, 5 million other things, many of which BLD covers. And you could rattle off, probably off the top of your heads, 50, 100 awesome impact organizations that are led by leaders who are awesome. Like you just named a bunch of them. I only know a couple that I've run into along the way. I'm just going to turn on my recorder and get the names and the websites and be like kind of a scout, because I can learn from your suggestions of well-run organizations where they're making an impact, whatever their mission is. And I know on the supply side, I'm kind of pointing this way because to the north, there's a lot of foundations where people just don't know about those grassroots kinds of organizations, and they would want to be making grants to them. They just need a warm introduction. Yeah. They know about the bigs, the big organizations.
We don't have our phones blowing up.
I know, right? After that one. But it's interesting, David, actually, because it's funny. I would I push back a little bit is they know about them, but they need the warm introduction.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is something that we battle with is to be rid of the introduction from a white guy, right?
Oh,
so that's where my past experiences, I worked for a foundation before.
Okay.
And they knew everybody in the community.
Oh.
But it was always using the term, the organization didn't have the capacity to
So what did they
do
mean
that work.
by that, Ken? Because somebody listening might not know exactly what.
Well, what
was your understanding?
Well, what they meant by capacity was they didn't have the back office structure, right? So they didn't have
They're not ready.
They're not ready. They didn't have the officers in place for it. They may not had all their, not necessarily their bookkeeping wasn't correct, right, for it. They may, their finances, the way they're operating may not be substantial for the foundation to support them. So that's what they were looking at, which is all true, But it's a small, as you said, it's a small organization who they're there for the mission, right?
Exactly.
They're going to get all the other stuff done. My take on this is like, okay, that's what we see.
Yeah.
And that's what you see as the foundation. But how about you fund them and also provide them the services, the coaching, connect them with people to help them get there, instead of saying, oh, we're not going to give you money because you don't have the capacity. I have the capacity to get the money. I need the money, right? But give me the coaching to help me with the other job, right? And so that's what I noticed in that position, to where, but it was always, money was always given to the people the organizations who were known, the organizations who were vouched for by another organization, or if a foundation got on the bandwagon, then all of them got on the bandwagon, right? Like, okay, they vetted you. So it's good. I'll give you money, right?
So Ken,
You're
I saw
getting
the
out of that
same thing.
mindset.
I worked at a large institutional foundation I won't name on this broadcast, and it was so frustrating for me because I would encounter the groups that you're talking about, the church food bank that didn't have an audit.
Yeah.
That was code.
Yep.
They don't have an audit. That was just
Yep.
so some of those pieces you said they're not ready. They don't have the capacity. They could set a threshold saying, once you have an audit, then we can look at you for a grant proposal. That was sort of code for we don't know where the money's going to make it to. Well, they're probably going to be buying food and diapers and giving it to poor people.
The stuff that they've been doing.
Right.
So what I'm trying to say, and forgive me if I misspoke, but I like finding the grassroots organizations that might not have that barrier, resolved yet. They don't have the audit.
Yeah.
Pastor Barry and Pastor Wally said they just now have an audit. Fortunately for them, that is sort of your meal ticket once you have an audit to go to the bigs, some of the institutional foundations that can make bigger dollar amounts once they hear the impact. What I'm talking about is there are family foundations, very people that are just kind of new to philanthropy who would never know, for instance, what Building Better Men is, Otis Bellinger.
Right.
They wouldn't even know to look at. But if I send and yes, I am a white guy, and I send them a link that says, look at this amazing group that I'm involved with that I just videoed Otis with kids. That's all they need to see. Like, this guy's having impact.
Yeah.
You're right. I would be making the intro, but otherwise they wouldn't know him. So my ability to learn from Dwan and from you, other organizations that are doing that, I know I can connect them to funding sources.
Yeah. But I think, like, strategically understanding that, Ken, just what you said, like, understanding, like, okay, you're going to need an endorsement from a white dude that's just real respected, right?
Yeah.
So I remember being on a call with two friends. Doug Stewart is one. I won't name the other. And we were talking about strategy to connect me with someone, and we were going to make a significant ask, right? We were asking for, a 2-year commitment, and it was going to be a pretty big ask for Black Leads Detroit at the time. And I remember sharing with Doug and the other friend that the fact that I need to be endorsed in Detroit doing work in a Black community by 2 white dudes pisses me off. And I was like, I just need y'all to know that. You know what I mean? That like I shouldn't need the 2 of you to endorse me to be taken seriously, right?
Yeah.
The fact that now if you're just going to give an endorsement, that's one thing. But in order, I understood, and I think they understood, in order to even be taken seriously, it had to come from them. So you still have that, right? Like those implicit biases that are there that are the cousin or the stepchild or the kid to racism, right? But I also believe that we have to be careful to not put everything in the racism box, right? And understand that some of it is definitely racism, some of it is relationship. You know what I mean? So and I think that there's a big difference between making sure that you have the relationships. I keep a running list of people that I want to have in my circle and in my group, right? And I intentionally try to figure out how to connect with them. Now, if I learn that there's somebody that I don't want to kick it with, I just don't kick it with them.
Right.
You know what I mean? But if they end up being cool people that'll have their sleeves rolled up and are serious about doing impactful work, I want to know them. And I don't care what their background is, their race is, or their beliefs are, any of that. I'm like, are you willing to do some work that aligns with the work that we're doing? Exactly. Are you doing some work that I want to align with and assist with that's making a difference? Then that's great. I mean, my piece on waiting to work with everybody from your community, because everybody from our community is not willing to do the work, going to do the work, or even have a life that's structured to be able to commit to doing the work, right? So many people are like trying to figure out how to get through the day. They don't have the luxury that we have to say, you know what, like I have a career that affords me the opportunity to commit my life to creating equity for Black folk. Like that's a huge luxury.
I think what has to be done too is, because like you just said, it's not always racism. It is relationships. Some of it dealing with racism, and then a lot of it dealing with biases that are tied into race, right? But I think we all have to challenge ourselves though, and see when you're doing that, right? And I have to do that myself. I mean, it's times where we're evaluating loan applicants, and you might see some things that are a red flag, and so, but it's a red flag because of your biases, that you have, just even in your baggage that you're bringing into the thought process,
and
right?
You're talking about a black man looking at a black applicant.
Right.
Interesting.
That's it.
That's it, right? So just think how someone else may look, right? But looking at a black applicant, it's like, okay, I'm seeing this from this perspective. Let me stop. Let me pause, because and take a step back and really look at everything that's going on, or maybe even try to look beyond what I see, right? And ask some questions to provide clarity. Yes. And we find ourselves doing that quite often. Like, we'll throw it out to like, man, we can joke about it like this and that. But okay, now let's get some clarity on it, some true clarity. Let's ask some questions to truly understand. Yes. But I think that's what I wish a lot of people would do, is to push past the biases you have, ask those questions. Sometimes it's uncomfortable to ask those questions.
It's embarrassing to acknowledge that within yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
embarrassing to say that as a black man, when I'm looking at application from a black person, I have to sift through all the things that I've been trained and taught to believe about black people. Being a black person, right? Because it's not like they had separate TV shows and trainings and education for us. We all drank from the same faucets. Not, the Jim Crow faucet, but the faucet that teaches the system to continue to recreate itself. Right? So there are things that we have to unlearn, and it's great to be able to do it in community. Because if it's just you by yourself, you're probably going to grade yourself on the curb and say, that's not what I'm doing. But if you're willing to be brave, as you just did, and just modeled and acknowledge it openly, now we can watch out for that in each other. Ken is always asking me.
I appreciate it, Ken, and
those type of questions.
I have a great deal to learn, and I am excited to learn from you all, both wearing my Hebrew Free Loan hat, wearing my hat I sit on the board of a private foundation, and I don't always sit on the same perspectives.
Did they give us money yet?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
They did.
All right, keep going. Keep going in.
Look at my thermometer. I ride for equity grant.
Right. Yes. He might be in the lead.
And
He
they
in the
did
lead.
He is.
All right. I put my money where my mouth is. So this foundation. So but I will tell you, not always are my colleagues on the same page as I am. Like they had to. I was the first one that mentioned building better men. I mean, we're using Otis as an example, and I said I have gone and seen the awesome work this guy does. All you have to do is see him in a room with young men. He's magnetic, and he lights up their self-esteem. And there were some questions about the financials, and he had to get some stuff together, and he had to show that he had a certain amount of whatever impact and CPA approved financials. Once that was done, that was just a box that had to be checked on all of our grants. And once he did that, now he's a perennial recipient of grants. So Brilliant Detroit, an organization we didn't mention yet, but they do an outstanding job at fundraising in their neighborhood fundraising model. And I know that race comes up a lot because it is led by my other good friend and another good friend of ours, Cindy Eggleton. And she is constantly, like Chris Lambert, working to make sure that as a white person running an organization that is very neighborhood based in Detroit, it is not about her and the color of her skin. It is about the ownership of that house by the neighborhood, and that donors and others need to understand that. And it's not, you bring up a very good point, Ken. It's not about a white person validating making grants and charitable support of black people and black neighborhoods. It's getting out of the way. That's why that term is important for me. I don't want to be anything other than to introduce you to the funding source. I've seen enough now where if I throw the ball up for Dwan, I know it's going to be a layup. He does it and takes it and makes it happen. Here is the number of someone from whatever bank. Boom. Next month he tells me how many, hundreds of thousands he got from that bank. Because you all can do it and will do it and have awesome impact. If a warm intro comes from me and it turns into that, I'm thinking of that as a win. But if there's something I can do differently in making that in a way that it feels real, please, obviously, as always, let me know.
I'm shocked you use he sucks at basketball, so I'm shocked you use a basketball.
Bad metaphor. Okay.
You should use a football,
I really
bait,
don't.
or
I really don't.
Or a hacky sack or something like that.
In the words of what's the Fire and Desire dude? Help me out, Martez. No.
Rick James.
Rick James.
Yeah.
I was cold as ice.
Long ago.
Long ago
is the key. Long ago is the key. Now you cold as ice on the bike. But yeah, that is all very interesting, David. And thank you for definitely sharing.
Yeah. Thanks for
all
hanging
the
out
information.
with us, man.
Yeah, I got one other quick question though before we go. I know we got to get going. But I did want to ask you earlier, because just with us doing our loans and some of the stories we hear from the community, like what's the success story that you've heard? They're just like, man, this is why we do this every single day. Share one of those success stories.
I could give you a lot from the personal and educational side, but something that's really connected to BLD on the business side. We provided a loan. I think it was 20. Let's see, he just had his 8th anniversary, 2015. A loan to a company called Jan Pro Detroit. It's a custodial cleaning company, commercial custodial cleaning company, and Jared Rothberger. I'm going to call him out on this, and I'll send him the link, and because he'll probably like it, and then 5 million people will see it on Facebook. Great guy, but was just starting this enterprise, and we weren't aware of his model. I don't know what your interview process is like. We saw his business plan, his financials, and his projections. He had it all mapped out, and he got the loan from us, and he was doing a good job building up the stuff. And then came the fall of 2019, and Jan Pro Detroit made the wise decision to stockpile huge supplies of hand sanitizer, chemical wipes, major industrial cleaning for offices. Right on the verge of COVID hitting. And
wow!
It took him to the next level, and he's not only the nicest guy. He and his wife Lisa are lovely people. He's a great leader. He, like you, got up to speed very quickly in his role as the chairman and founder of his organization and his for-profit, and just was the guy that had all the right stuff at the right time. Right?
Nice.
All the right supplies. So he has been now on our board for about a year and a half. He has paid off his loan early. He is very successful. He works his tail off. It's a very successful company. One of many success stories, but just the example of a good person who's already involved in the community, wanting to give back. Now he's on our board. He sits on our side of the table interviewing. He said, I used to be on that side of the table. Getting a loan, now I know what those people are going through. So
nice, very nice. Love it.
I want to do one segment before we bounce. Okay. So we're gonna do. I think David wanted to do. You know nothing, Jon Snow.
You know nothing.
So this segment, if you're not familiar with it, what we invite our guests to do is share a story either about someone else that knows nothing or was clueless on the subject matter, or a personal one that, something that you were clueless on, or learning on, or whatever the case may be. So
you can say
you're
clueless.
You're familiar with the Game of Thrones and whatnot. So what is your nothing Jon Snow
So
story?
I remember when we were first working together in the first year, and you mentioned something about Juneteenth. And I had a misunderstanding of what Juneteenth was, as embarrassed as I am about that, because I'm a student of history, and it was never taught in my school. And then I said something, you're like, no, that's not what Juneteenth was. Juneteenth was, and you educated me just in a little soundbite, and I thought, I've got a lot to learn. And then you were talking, that's one of many items I'd like to do a deeper dive on and learn more about from you and from other sources. You were talking about Black Wall Street in Tulsa. And I don't know if your listeners know what your big plan is.
Not yet.
All right, so I'm not going to say anything about that, but the idea of a Black Wall Street being in Tulsa, and a time when, even here in this picture behind us, where a black bottom with successful small businesses was happening and thriving, the idea that is what Detroit could, should, will be looking like, largely due to great organizations like yours and the ability to get capital to smart, talented entrepreneurs who just needed capital. So my lack of knowledge of Juneteenth, my lack of knowledge of Black Wall Street, my lack of knowledge of, just, even though I'm trying to educate myself as a Caucasian person in this country, what your community, the black community in this country, has gone through. As much as I can read and learn about it, I am not from your community. I don't experience the racism every day or as often as you all do when you go into a store, or when you are pulled over by a police officer, or all the things I hear. I know it's a different America. And I just know if I were a black person in this country, I would have a very hard time trusting white people and trusting white institutions. I'm saying that because I think that's how I would feel. So if there's anything I can do to get more educated, clearly there are lots of things I could do to keep reading, keep asking, keep playing Jon Snow and admitting what I don't know to people who can help educate me. It'll help me be a better person, a better American, better friend, and better advocate, that I can share that information with other people who also probably don't know as much about that stuff as they should.
Like that answer.
Yeah,
right, is that a good answer?
Like John Snow, I think you're going to be all right. No, that was good. I think that's it.
That's it. That's it.
So y'all heard it from David. Come and hang out with us May 21st and do the ceremonial send-off. We're going to make Ken take a steroid test beforehand.
David got to take one with me.
I will take one. I'll take one with you. You got it. That's a deal. I thank you guys very much for the opportunity to be on the show, and it's just a pleasure. We're friends, and like I mentioned, our friendship feels like it gets deeper each time we meet and connect, and I'm getting to know Ken a little bit better each time, and Martez, and it's just a pleasure to work with people who make a difference, and from whom I can learn and be a better person.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you guys.
Well, that's it. We're out.
Peace.
Peace.